There's something almost cinematic about a 1960s school morning. You can picture it now: rows of neatly lined uniforms, polished shoes reflecting the pale light of an overcast sky, and the steady shuffle of children forming perfect cues without being told twice. Inside, the corridors echoed with a mix of hushed chatter and the distant hum of the assembly hall warming up. Everything felt orderly, predictable, and steeped in a sense of purpose. Yet beneath that calm routine were rules so strict, so precise, that many modern parents would blink in disbelief. These expectations weren't unusual back then. They were simply part of growing up. Every collar straight, every voice lowered, every step measured. And while today's schools feel far more relaxed and flexible, the 1960s demanded something else entirely: quiet discipline and unquestioned structure, setting the stage for the surprising traditions that defined daily school life. To understand why school life in the 1960s felt so structured, you have to picture the mindset of post-war Britain. Order wasn't just encouraged, it was celebrated. Families valued discipline, cleanliness, and punctuality, believing these habits shaped a child's character for life. Schools naturally mirrored this outlook. Classrooms often held 30 or more pupils, yet somehow the atmosphere remained calm. Guided by routines, everyone understood without needing explanation. Traditional uniforms created a sense of unity, with crisp collars and tidy hems, symbolizing pride as much as appearance. Inside the classroom, wooden desks stood in perfectly arranged rows, each one holding exercise books filled with careful handwriting. Morning assemblies were a daily ritual, bringing the whole school together before the first lesson even began. Timekeeping mattered deeply. A late arrival wasn't simply a delay. It felt like breaking an unspoken promise. Teachers and parents shared the belief that structure offered children stability in a world still finding its footing after great change. Looking back, it's clear these routines weren't just rules. They were part of the rhythm of daily life, setting the foundation for the expectations that shaped every school day that followed. What stood out immediately in a 1960s school was the uniform. It wasn't simply clothing. It was a code, a quiet promise that every child belonged to something bigger than themselves. Shoes had to shine enough to catch the light, collars sat neatly in place, and hair was kept tidy with almost ceremonial care. Even the smallest details mattered: matching socks, proper ties, and blazers that felt slightly stiff from careful ironing the night before. Teachers often checked these things the moment pupils arrived, casting quick but observant glances that missed nothing. There was pride in looking the part. Gray trousers, pleated skirts, and crisp shirts created a sense of shared identity. And the familiar smell of freshly pressed fabric lingered in the air as children lined up for morning lessons. Compared to today's more relaxed dress codes, the expectations of the era feel almost unimaginable. Yet they shaped the tone of every school day that followed, setting a standard that guided the rest of the routine. Stepping into a 1960s classroom meant stepping into a world where manners shaped the entire atmosphere. Children were expected to sit straight, hands neatly folded or resting calmly on their desks, creating a quiet order that felt almost ceremonial. Speaking happened only when invited, and every response began with "sir" or "miss," a respectful habit so ingrained that few ever questioned it. The simple act of raising a hand carried weight, signaling patience and discipline rather than impatience to be heard. There were unwritten rules, too. If an adult entered the room, pupils stood instantly, chairs scraping in unison before settling back into silence. Lining up for lessons or breaks required absolute quiet, with long queues of children waiting calmly as though silence itself were part of the curriculum. Teachers guided behavior with an expectation of dignity and respect, and children responded instinctively, knowing exactly what was required. To a modern parent, this level of formality might seem astonishing, even slightly surreal. Yet, for those who grew up in the era, it was simply how things were, a shared understanding that good manners weren't optional, but the very foundation of school life, preparing children for the routines that shaped the rest of their day. Every school day in the 1960s carried a rhythm of rituals that felt as fixed as the changing of the seasons. After morning registration, pupils filed into assembly in perfectly organized queues, each line moving with a quiet precision that would astonish many people today. Seating was rarely random. Each class had its place, each row its purpose, and the gentle murmur of children settling in quickly faded into respectful silence as the morning began. Corridors, too, had their own etiquette. Walking between lessons meant keeping to an orderly pace, voices low, footsteps steady. Even handwriting had its ritualistic standards, neat lines, careful strokes, and margins that reflected a pride in presentation. Teachers celebrated tidy work not just as a skill, but as a reflection of care and effort. Lunchtime followed its own sequence. Pupils queued patiently, collected their meals, and sat in set arrangements that rarely changed. Clearing plates wasn't a casual act. It followed a specific order that everyone seemed to absorb without being taught. Participation in group activities was expected, not optional, encouraging a sense of shared responsibility. Compared to today's more flexible child-led atmosphere, these routines might feel astonishingly rigid. Yet they shaped school days with a structure that many still remember fondly. Inside the 1960s classroom, learning followed a rhythm built on focus and repetition. Memorization played a central role, with pupils reciting lessons aloud until the words felt almost musical. Copying work neatly from the chalkboard was a daily exercise in patience, each letter shaped with care to keep the page clean and orderly. Weekly tests arrived with quiet regularity, not dramatic events, but gentle checkpoints that encouraged steady progress. Exercise books were treated almost like personal treasures. Margins stayed crisp, pages uncreased, and handwriting flowed in careful lines that reflected a child's growing confidence. The classroom itself was filled with objects. Many remember fondly the soft dust from the chalkboard, the reliable weight of a wooden ruler, colorful wall maps that brought the wider world to life, and ink pens that encouraged deliberate, thoughtful writing. Everything in this environment nudged children toward concentration and pride in their work. Order wasn't simply expected, it was woven into the fabric of learning. And while today's classrooms embrace flexibility and creativity in new ways, the structured practices of the past created a memorable sense of purpose, setting the stage for the reflections that followed in later years. For all the structure and formality of 1960s school life, what lingers most in memory isn't the rules themselves, but the warmth that quietly surrounded them. Schools often felt like small communities where teachers knew every child by name and noticed when someone seemed a little out of sorts. The routines that once felt firm now seem comforting in hindsight, offering a sense of stability during a decade of change. Within those wooden corridors and echoing halls, friendships were formed in moments so ordinary they felt unremarkable at the time. Shared glances during assembly, whispered conversations in tidy lines, laughter that slipped out despite the expectation of silence. Looking back, many people remember the pride of presenting neat work, the small triumph of mastering a new skill, or the simple joy of belonging to a group that moved through each day together. Even the rules that seem strict by today's standards carry a strange charm now, softened by nostalgia. They helped shape character, created shared stories, and stitched together memories that still bring a smile decades later. And it's those gentle echoes of togetherness that naturally lead us to consider how different school life feels in the modern day. When we compare 1960s school life to today, the contrast is striking. Modern classrooms are more flexible, with a stronger focus on student voice, creativity, and personal expression. Uniforms are looser, routines more adaptable, and children are encouraged to question, explore, and shape their own learning. Yet the structured world of the past created its own strengths, resilience, patience, and a shared sense of belonging that many still treasure. Each era shaped children in different ways, neither better nor worse, simply reflections of their time. Looking back allows us to appreciate the values that guided earlier generations, while recognizing how society has grown, softened, and changed in thoughtful ways. And before you go, make sure you tap the video appearing on your screen. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Don't forget to subscribe.